Hello everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG, and welcome to part 3 on how to build a cube. In previous episodes, we've gone over the basics of building a cube, we've gone over getting our archetypes down, we've got our gold cards. Today, we're going to be talking about packages. Packages are a selection of cards that synergize specifically with each other, rather than a whole archetype in your cube. They can make whole new decks possible, or they can just be additional cool synergies that makes decks and drafts more interesting. Let me give you some examples of what I'm talking about. So a classic package in Cube is things like Kiki Jiki and Splinter Twin combos. Kiki Jiki or Splinter Twin, plus a creature that can untap either itself or another creature, effectively makes an infinite board of hasty creatures, and it's a combo. Another classic package is Dark Depths. Basically, you play Dark Depths, and you play a bunch of ways of taking the counters off it to make a big 2020 squiddly fish. A recent example of a package that's really got popularity in the Modo Vintage Cube recently is the Flash package. Basically, you have Flash combined with creatures that leaves things on the battlefield when they die. You flash in your creature for 2 mana, you don't pay the extra mana, it dies straight away, but you're left with a board so that you get all this value for just 2 mana. But they don't just have to be multi-card combos. One of my favourite examples of a package was something that Ryan Sachs was running in his cube. I'll put a link down in the description below to that. But he was running Grove of the Burn Willows and Punishing Fire in his cube. These cards interact in a really cool way. Basically, you repeatedly get to shock something every turn. This isn't a game-winning combo, but it's cool and it's something interesting that your drafters can build. Another example could be, if you're already running something like Green Sun Zenith, you could turn it into a ramp spell by adding Dryad Arbor to your cube. For a single green, you can go and shoot a Dryad Arbor, which is a creature, but also a land. So those are some examples. Why should you think of running them in your cube? The TLDR is that it basically makes games and drafts more interesting. The 10 guild-colored archetypes we've gone through in previous videos, those are archetypes that there's signposts for. Those are archetypes that people will know from the cards that they see immediately how to build that deck or put that deck together. The point of packages is that it takes a bit of time for people to understand how they work. You're basically adding replayability to your cube. And what's nice as well is a lot of these packages will tend to reward the people who are invested in your cube, the players who are paying attention to what you're bringing in and what you're taking out. Because they'll see these group of cards come in and be like, I wonder what this is about. What do they do together? How can I make this work? Some packages will definitely reward better players, because if they see Kiki Jiki Splinter Twin coming in and they've played it and they know how that works, they're more likely to be able to draft that early on. But what's nice about Magic is once a player has seen an interaction, they can then copy it and do it themselves. So it'll quickly spread to the other drafters in your group. Another thing with packages is you are doing the thing that Magic players love. We are finding cool synergies. Let's go back to the Grove of the Burn Willows Punishing Fire example. Individually, Grove of the Burn Willows is not as good as a lot of Gruul dual lands out there. And in the same way, Punishing Fire is a lot worse than a lot of just generically good red removal out there. But when these two cards are combined, you get something more powerful than the individual parts. Finding those cool little synergies and those little interactions is a lot of reason why people play Magic and a lot of reason why people play Cube. They like building the puzzle, and basically you're giving them more pieces to put together. And when a player puts that puzzle together, they get the sense of achievement. It means they're more likely to enjoy themselves and more likely to want to draft your cube again, which at the end of the day is what we're really after, more cube. So that's why you should run them. Let's go over how you actually add packages to your cube. First and foremost, you need to think about what the package actually is. What do you want to add? The inspiration for this is a lot like your archetypes. It can come from anywhere. You can look at other cubes. It can be decks. It can be interactions from Modern, Legacy, or Vintage, or even Commander. You can look at old constructed decks. Was there anything cool that you've done in the past that you'd like? Like Splinter Twin in Cube came from the Modern deck. We have videos on this channel where we go over some of the packages that I've run and tested in my own cube. There is an option on Cube Cobra for packages, but at time of recording, it's a little bit bugged. It's either under maintenance or still needs to be worked on, but hopefully in the future that can be something that people can use as a resource to find more packages. So once you have the overall idea of what your package is going to be, there are some things to consider first and foremost. So firstly, packages are more powerful the smaller the cube size. This is because basically the smaller the cube size, the more likely the package is to be opened. The flip side of that is in bigger cubes, it means you're less likely to see all the individual pieces in any singular draft. This is why Kiki Jiki Splinter Twin is seen in so many higher powered level cubes, because there's just so much redundancy for it. Yes, Kiki Jiki and Splinter Twin are the main combo pieces. There are a ton of cards that combo with them that you can look to run to give you the extra redundancy in the package to work at larger settings. We've kind of seen this as well with the Wheels deck or the Wheels archetype that's seeing play in a lot of powerful cubes right now. There's plenty of cards that make both players discard their hand and draw a bunch of new cards. but now there's a ton of cards that reward you by punishing your opponent when that happens. That extra level of redundancy with packages can be important because it means that the person drafting it is more likely to get their bits at larger sizes of cube. This is one reason why Dark Depths tends to struggle to appear as a deck in larger cubes. There's only one copy of Dark Depths. There's a ton of things that can take counters off or cheat the counters off in some way, but at the end of the day, if you don't have Dark Depths, your Dark Depths deck isn't really going to work. So that's why when you're adding the package to your cube, you need to work out what the key parts are. What are the key aspects that you're wanting to drill down on? If it's a couple of cards that synergize together, then that's pretty easy to add. You know the important cards in the little interaction. If you're in a smaller cube, you know you're likely to see it more often. If you're in a larger cube, you might just have to accept that it's not something that'll happen every time. It's a nice to have. When it comes together, people will be happy. But if it's a larger package, like a combo or something to make more of a deck open up, it's best to think what are your key cards. And then if you're in a larger cube, think what bits of redundancy there are for that package. So let's actually look at Kiki Jiki and Splinter Twin. Kiki Jiki and Splinter Twin are the key combo pieces here. These are the bits that you need to make this combo work. Fortunately, there are two of them, so even in a 540 or even a 720 cube, you are statistically likely to at least see one of them. As you mentioned, these primarily combo with cards that untap themselves. The cards you see combined most with Splinter Twin and Kiki Jiki is Deceiver Exarch and Pestamite. So if you're in a 360 cube, you can run those four cards and then you have this combo perfectly in your cube. If you're in a cube larger than 360 and you want some redundancy, there's more effects that do the untappy part of the combo. You can look at Zealous Conscripts, you can look at Combat Celebrant, you can look at Breaching Hippocamp. Those are the extra bits of redundancy that you're looking for. It means that even if only one bit of Kiki Jiki or Splinter Twin is opened, someone can still make the combo work because there's plenty of the other bits available to you. The other thing to consider is how the package fits into your cube. Are there any other overlap cards that you can run? Cards that work in this package but also work in other decks that you're already running. So in cubes that are running Kiki Jiki and Splinter Twin, you also often see a card like Restoration Angel. Now Restoration Angel only combos with Kiki Jiki. It doesn't do anything with Splinter Twin. But Restoration Angel is just good in other decks. It's a great value white card. It's great at resetting your ETBs. It's great in Blink archetypes, so cubes will often run this as an additional piece to the Kiki Jiki combo, but just as a good card in other decks as well. Again, finding these cool synergies will really make the player experience in your cube all that more enjoyable. So that's everything you need to consider when thinking about adding a package to your cube. Let's actually go ahead and do it with the cube that I'm building along with this series of videos. Now, first of all, I will admit the package that I'm going to be adding to the cube I'm building is not going to be one that a lot of people are going to be adding to their cubes in general. But the process that I'm doing is something that people can follow along with. The reason I'm saying that is because I'm adding Dragonstorm to the cube I'm building along with this video. So here is our cube. This is where we left off last time. Let's add Dragonstorm as a package to this cube. So the first thing we need to work out is what is the deck doing? So on screen, here is what Dragonstorm looked like when it first came about in, dear God, 2007. It was a really cool standard deck at the time that revolves around the card Dragonstorm. Basically what you're doing is you're ramping, you're playing ritual effects to raise up your storm count, and then you can either cast a Dragonstorm to get a bunch of dragons from your deck and put them into play, or just use the mana to ramp into a big dragon that you already have in your hand and win the game that way. So the first thing to work out is what are the key cards? What do I need? Well, firstly, I need the card Dragonstorm. That's going to be very important in the Dragonstorm archetype. Then obviously, I need some big dragons to cheat into play with it. We then obviously need some kind of ritual effects. We need some ways of getting the mana up nice and quickly with it. We need some effects that can ramp us into Dragonstorm. We can look at the deck we're taking inspiration from for some ideas. You can do the same thing if you're copying an interaction from like a modern deck or from a commander deck that you like. What are the key bits of the interaction? We're then going to look for bits of redundancy. Now, in this example, the key part of this whole deck is Dragonstorm because it cheats dragons into play. So basically, so I can have some extra redundancy, I need to find another card that helps me cheat dragons into play. So I'm going to use a card like Bellbase Portal. This helps me cheat dragons into play. It's effectively a second copy of Dragonstorm. It's not going to be as good as Dragonstorm because it doesn't go through the deck, but it will still do a job in the deck when someone puts it together. We have that redundancy now, which can make the deck be a bit more functional. Another card I could run for some redundancy is a card like Ignite Memories. Now, Ignite Memories was actually run in the deck that Dragonstorm was originally played in. That's one of the nice things about taking your ideas from decks that already exist, because other people will have already found bits of redundancy for you to then take. Ignite Memories seems like a perfectly solid backup win condition to the Dragonstorm deck. So we have our key cards, we have our redundancy. The next thing to think about is what overlap cards are there? How can we make this work in our cube? So for that, I'm going to be looking at the archetypes. What cards do I think can overlap there? So in the cube I'm building, in Izzet, we are running an Izzet Blitz strategy. This cares about casting a lot of cheap spells to pump up creatures. These decks like things like cheap cantrips. They're cheap, efficient spells that replace themselves with another card. Blitz loves them because the creatures have like prowess, or things like prowess that buff up them creatures when you cast instants and sorceries. The Dragonstorm deck will like these cheap cantrips because it adds to the storm count, meaning you get more dragons when you cast your Dragonstorm. So I know in blue I'm going to have a couple of cheap cantrips, but there's cards like Gitaxian Probe, which is a free cantrip. There's cards like Manamorphose, which replaces itself as a card and also mana. These are more kind of storm specific. I can look to run those as well. I'm kind of putting them specifically for the Dragonstorm deck, but again, Blitz will really love these cards. Secondly, in terms of overlap, I know that I want Dimir in my cube to be like a Reanimator style strategy. Both Dragonstorm and Reanimator want big creatures that you can cheat into play. So if I just make the big creatures in my cube dragons, then both archetypes are happy. I even have synergies with other archetypes in my cube. Like in Golgari, it's like a Graveyard Matters style of theme. It wants to fill up the graveyard with creatures. There are dragons that bring themselves back from the graveyard. I can look at running those. Then because my Gruul section is a rampy monster starter deck, dragons do a load of work into that section as well. By doing the extra little step of finding cards that can overlap when you're doing things like this, again, I've said it before, it just makes the whole cube environment seem more smooth and everything just fits together that little bit nicer. Nothing feels out of place. So obviously when I'm doing this now, I'm doing this while I'm building the cube. It's quite easy for me to find room for packages because I'm only halfway through building the cube. I know plenty of people watching this video will already have a cube and be asking, well, how do I fit it into a cube that's already full? So we'll go over some tips for that now. So let's go back to a really easy example of this. Let's go back to one of the small little synergy packages that you want to add. Let's go back to something like Grove of the Burnwillows and Punishing Fire. Something like this is a really nice, easy, neat little package to add, because basically what you're doing is you're taking your worst Gruul land, you're taking your worst burn spell, and you're replacing them with two cards that synergize better together. If it's a bigger change, say something like Kiki Jiki and Splinter Twin, which can be a ton of cards, then you need to make more room for them. For those, you basically have to carve a little hole in your cube, and I know that doesn't sound fun, but trust me, it's not too hard. You know what colors the packages are in, you're basically looking to make room in those colors. So what you're going to be doing is cutting like the worst card in an archetype in those colors, or you're cutting like the most generic worst like burn spell, something like that. You're looking to cut a card that is just like fine, a good vanilla magic card. And while that might not sound great, basically what you're doing, you're removing the worst bit of depth from one archetype or one color. But on the flip side, you're adding something new and something interesting. Like basically you're asking yourself, does your cube need like the 5th copy of Lightning Bolt and the 5th aggressive red 1-drop? Does it need the worst counterspell? Does it need the worst cantrip? Can I cut those 4 cards and put in Kiki Jiki Splinter Twin combo into my cube? And that's the thing, in terms of what you cut and what you add, it's entirely up to you, and the only way that you'll really know if it's worked is with testing, is with playing the cube. But one other thing about packages is that it makes cubes more fun, so you're more likely to play more Magic, so it's why I think it's really important for people to try. So that's where we're going to leave the video for today. There is definitely a bigger, broader conversation in terms of packages that we'll definitely have on this channel at some point in the future, because some cubes can entirely be made by packages. Like if you look at the Mitgo Vintage Cube, effectively you have very broad archetypes and some good cards, then it's just crammed full of cool, interesting packages. Building a cube like that is an entirely different beast, and we'll get onto that definitely later on in the series. If you found this video or this series helpful, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. It would really help me out. Because next week, we're going to be finishing the cube. We're going to be filling in everything that you need, everything else that's left. Do also let me know down in the comments if there's anything else that you would like to see from this series. Like I've seen people put comments on like draft advice or how you actually organize pairings at a cube, something like that. If there's anything like that that you would find helpful, do let me know. All that stuff is super helpful. But anyway, until next time, I will see you all soon. Goodbye. Miri, what's your favorite cube package? Oh, cat combo. Good choice. Love you, darling.